Hey y'all, it's Nova Hobo and welcome back to another video. Alright, well I had to move into the shade because man, it is hot outside. Summer is still going on strong. But I am so excited because today we're kind of switching it up from my normal hiking content and we are moving into gear reviews. I have all of my notes ready to make sure that I don't forget anything so that if you guys are interested in quilts or this quilt in particular, you know exactly what you're getting into. So this entire gear review is going to be on a quilt by Enlightened equipment called the Revelation Custom 0 Degree. So I paid $346.50 to be exact. I made sure I wrote it down because that is a hefty price and I am a broke college student, so every penny counts and that one hurt the bank to pay for. You're probably wondering why I would spend over $300 when I actually already have a really good sleeping bag, and I'll get into all the reasons why, but first let me give you a little background on my sleeping bag. So the sleeping bag that I use is by Big Agnes and it's called the Oliphant. I don't know, it looks like elephant, but I don't know how to pronounce it. Oliphant 0 Degree women's bag. This bag is a 0 degree bag and it is a whopping 4 pounds 4 ounces, which in the backpacking community is very heavy for a bag. Granted, a lot of people use 20 degree, 25 degree bags, but I am a really cold sleeper and being cold at night is like one of the worst feelings in the world. So I always tend to stick to 0 degree bags and quilts because I know that it'll keep me warm and that I'll be safe and happy while camping. The Big Agnes sleeping bag also has a pretty hefty price at $260 to $300 depending on where you get it, which actually that price, although it is very expensive, not gonna lie, it is pretty average for getting a good sleeping bag or a good quilt, especially one that's 0 degrees. The Big Agnes bag is also 600 fill power down tech. So this sleeping bag is amazing. I love it. I highly recommend it to people who are super cold sleepers or even doing winter camping. I don't think it could be your sole winter camping bag, like you would have to have extra precautions going into winter camping, like a higher R value for a sleeping mat or a warmer tent and stuff like that, but it is an incredible bag. For the longest time I kept telling myself, no, you do not need a quilt, you have an incredible sleeping bag. But then the more I got into researching quilts and figuring out what I like while camping and backpacking, I realized that I really did need a quilt. Okay, so one of the reasons why I wanted to switch to a quilt is because it cuts significantly on weight. And this is because a quilt is different from a sleeping bag in that it does not have a back portion. The logic behind not having a back on the quilt is that when you're sleeping in a sleeping bag, you are compressing all the down behind your back, so then it doesn't even have the insulating properties that you would want from a bag. The quilt just takes the back portion out and gets rid of it since it's not insulating you anyways, and really cuts on weight. With a quilt and with a sleeping bag, but especially a quilt, it is crucial to also have a great sleeping mat that goes along with it. The R value of a sleeping mat measures how warm it is, and the higher the R value, the warmer it is. And I would recommend a pretty high R value if you're sleeping in colder weathers. This is the mat that I use for 3-season backpacking, and it has an R value of 3.5, which is one that I would recommend if you're trying to get into 3-season backpacking. For 4-season backpacking, which includes winter camping, I would recommend a higher R value, but 3.5 is a really good one to stick to. I've used this pad in lots of different weathers paired with both my quilt and my sleeping bag, and I've never gotten cold. I've slept in tons of different weathers with both my quilt and my sleeping bag, and I've noticed that basically the only time that I get cold is if I sleep on a different sleeping mat that doesn't have a high enough R value for the weather I'm sleeping in. Last night was cold. cold. It was really cold. And so I could not sleep on that new sleeping mat that I've been trying out. I had to go in and get my Sea to Summit mat, which has an higher R value, which makes it warmer at night. And then I was able to sleep. I never thought it was that important. I was like, you just sleep on a mat, whatever. But no, that's where all of your heat escapes. So you want it to be warm enough to keep your heat in, because otherwise, girl, you're gonna be cold. I have a few other reasons why I really wanted a quilt, but first I kind of want to get into the specs of everything. So here are the specs of my quilt. One of the biggest reasons why I ended up switching to a quilt is because my bag, as I said, is 4 pounds 4 ounces, which pains me to even say. And my quilt that I have now is only 2 pounds, so that shaved off over 2 pounds of my weight. Another reason why I love this quilt is because it has 850 fill power down, and you can also go up to 950 fill power down, which will lower the weight. In case you don't know, because I didn't know when I first started looking at bags and quilts, fill power refers to how much down it takes to insulate your bag. So 950 and 850, they're both going to be the same temperature rating at 0 degrees, but the 950 fill power down is going to take less down to insulate it to that temperature, which means that it will be lighter than the 850 fill power down. As a broke college student though, the 950 fill power down has a higher price tag that I was not willing to pay, so I just opted for the little bit heavier weight of 850 fill power down because it keeps you just as warm as the 950. The 950 fill power down does cut your weight by around 2.5 ounces, so if that's worth it to you, you might want to keep that in mind. Another thing you can do to cut weight is you can go down on the temperature ratings. So I have a 0 degree quilt, but you can always go up to 10, 20, 30 degrees, and about every 10 degrees that you go up, it'll lower your weight by about 3 to 4 ounces. A lot of people are perfectly happy in 20 degree quilts. I have a few people that I've talked to about through hikes that they've done where they've hiked an entire section of trail with just a 10 or a 20 or even a 30 degree bag. But since I run really cold, I definitely don't want to give on that, so I definitely lean on the warmer side of things, and I always stick to a 0 degree. So another spec about my custom quilt that I did not actually realize before ordering it is that it was the long version. I thought I was getting the regular, but I ended up getting the long version. The regular sizing saves a little over an ounce of weight, but actually now that I have the long version, I definitely would not go back to a regular, because I figured out that I love it when I can pull the quilt over my face and over my head. It just makes me feel nice and secure when I'm out camping. Another feature on my quilt is called a draft collar, and this is where there is a collar that goes around your neck that you can cinch so that no air can get in. I liked this feature because I'm planning on using my quilt for the through hike of the Pacific Crest Trail that I'm going to do in 2 years, so I really wanted to make sure that when I was up in the Sierra Mountains, I wasn't like, dang it, I really wish that I had an extra ounce of weight so that I could have a draft collar and not freeze right now, because my temperature regulation is awful. So I wanted every single little thing that could possibly help with warmth. Without the draft collar, it still cinches down to your neck, so you can still stay pretty warm. It just won't insulate your neck quite as much as a draft collar will. So I've mentioned a few times that I am a broke college student, and one of my favorite things about this website is that they offer a warehouse section, which is a section for overstock or scratch and dent, as they call it, items, which just means that they've been overstocked, they have too many of the product, or somebody's returned it, or the product has a problem with it, such as like a scratch or a dent. So with the warehouse items, they usually discount them for around 10 to 20%. So that's what I did. I got a discounted overstock quilt. That's part of the reason why I didn't know that it was long. I made sure to check, but I guess I just didn't check enough. So that's why I didn't know it was long. I also was not able to choose the colors. I wasn't able to choose any of the specifics, but after looking at all of the other warehouse items that they had, I was able to narrow down to this one, to one that I really liked and loved all of the aspects of. The only thing I don't really love is the colors of it. I think I probably would have chosen any other colors, but that's okay because I actually kind of like that. I think it's not as pretty or like cute as I would want it, because that just gives me a little bit of entitlement to mess it up, get it a little bit dirty, and I don't feel as bad about it. So I can really use the quilt how I would want to use it. If you don't want to go with an overstock or a scratch and dent item, they also have stock items. So if you want to get a stock item, it's usually around $350 per quilt for the Revelation, and then it's about $385 for a custom quilt. I love that they have the custom options because you're able to choose the fill power, the color, which I definitely would have taken advantage of if I didn't get a warehouse item. You can also choose the degree, obviously, and then you can choose if you have a draft collar, what length. You can choose a lot of different options that is really nice that aren't offered to you if you buy a stock item. One of the things that made it appealing to me to buy the warehouse item, well, first of all, the price, and then second of all, was because of their return policy. So I have their return and lead time policies on my computer, and I thought I'd just read it straight off of their website so you know exactly what you're getting into. So for returns, they say stock items and warehouse items ship in 1 to 2 business days and can be returned for a full refund within 30 days of shipping. But custom products can be returned within 30 days of shipping and will be charged 20% of the item's original purchase price as a restocking fee. Trying out a quilt for the first time and not having the luxury of knowing that I could return it without having a 20% fee charged to me just was not worth it. So I went with the warehouse item. One other service that I thought I would mention that I really liked by Enlightened Equipment is that they actually do repairs. If you have to send in your quilt because you accidentally damaged it or you need it repaired, then you can send it to them and they will repair it for you for a $60 base fee. That still sounds pretty expensive to me, but it does not sound as expensive as repurchasing a $300 to $400 quilt. These quilts are really well made, so I definitely haven't had to worry at all about repairs or anything yet, but I do like knowing that I have that option if later on down the line it does get damaged. Alright, I also have their specs on lead times, so I'm going to read that now. Current lead times for custom down quilts is 6 to 8 weeks, custom synthetic quilts is 6 to 8 weeks, and then custom accessories 8 to 10 weeks, non-custom ships in 1 to 2 business days. So I made sure to write down when I placed the order and when my order shipped and when I received my order, because I did not want to wait 6 to 8 weeks for a custom quilt because I wanted to start sleeping with my quilt as soon as possible to get used to it, and I'm happy to say that I did get it very quick. So it shipped in 3 days, which is a day longer than they said, since they said 1 to 2 days of shipping, but I don't mind that. Okay, so I'm watching the footage back and I was just thinking about it, and when I placed my order, 2 business days after I placed my order is when my product shipped. So it actually probably did ship between the 2 days that they promised it by. And then 4 days after that, I received the quilt. So in total, it took a week from me placing my order to receiving my quilt. Well, I just finished filming and realized that I already forgot to say something that was super important. So a feature on the quilt is that you can attach it to your sleeping pad. This means that you're not gonna like slide all around or that your quilt's gonna get off of you. It will stay there and it'll stay put. The way you attach it is there are 2 bands that go around your sleeping pad and attach to the quilt on either end of it. Depending on where you want your quilt or how you want it set up, you can attach 1, 2, or none of those straps. I've set it up all of those ways and each one of them works great. I really do like the aspect though of not having my sleeping system just moving around all the time. I like that it's stuck in place right over me where I want it. Okay, back into the video. Alright, so now we are done with the specs. Let's get into what I actually thought of using the bag and testing it out and what my real opinions are on it. So, I absolutely love my quilt. I don't think I can ever go back to a sleeping bag. I have so many good things to say about it. I was nervous when I got my quilt that there would only be just like a few slight differences and that it wouldn't really make that much of a difference, so I just blew all this money on just a few tiny little changes. But those changes, those small changes, make a huge difference. One of the first things that I noticed is that I did not feel claustrophobic while I was in the quilt. And I don't think I really realized that I was claustrophobic in the bag until I saw what I was missing out on when I tried my quilt. Ever since I got my quilt, I've been sleeping better. I really like it. I slept so good. My quilt is my favorite thing in the whole world. I do have a thing called restless leg syndrome, and so some nights when I was sleeping in my sleeping bag, I'd have to toss and turn and my legs would be so uncomfortable, but I don't think I've had that issue once when I've had my quilt. The reason for this is because it's so versatile and you can set it up in so many different ways to suit your needs that you can also just like stick a leg or stick an arm out, and then you can move around as much as you want. But if it is colder, you can cinch it up too and make it super warm. One thing that I noticed is that it felt more like I was sleeping with a comforter on like you would at home than was sleeping in like a tight constrictive sleeping bag. One thing that I really like is that it almost feels less like you're sleeping in a sleeping bag or a mummy bag and more like you're sleeping like at home with just a comforter over you or something. There are so many different ways to set it up. I've only tried a few of how many different ways that I could set it up, but one of my favorite ways is to set it up and just almost use it like a blanket. I decided to set up my quilt a different way than usual because the past few days, maybe weeks, I've been getting super hot in my quilt. So I was like, you know what, I'm gonna set it up a new way. So usually I have the foot box completely cinched and closed and zipped up. But tonight I decided that I was gonna try basically the whole quilt as a blanket. So I'm hoping I don't get cold in the night somehow, but it's really hot right now. So it's kind of hard to imagine. It'll be fun to try a new way and I will update you in the morning on how it goes. So I tried out my quilt with the like blanket style that I was thinking of, and I actually really liked it. It kept all of the heat in, even though it wasn't like cinched down around my feet at all. I still stayed really warm, but then if I got too hot or something, I could just throw it off of me really easily. I did really like using it like this because it just felt cooler throughout the night. Which I liked. When it's colder, I do cinch down the foot box and then it keeps me really warm. I also like that I can just have one side of it open or all of it closed up. It just depends on what I want that night. I set up my quilt a little bit differently so that I can easily get out. Another thing I was nervous about was if it was going to be easy to like clean or wipe off if I was getting it really dirty. Anytime there's dirt on it or anything, I can just wipe it off and it comes right off. No. The biggest fear that I had was that it was not going to be as warm as a sleeping bag. I was like, there's no way that my huge 4-pound sleeping bag is not going to be way warmer than this tiny little quilt that doesn't even have a back on it. But I was wrong. I did only sleep in this really thin t-shirt and then just a thin pair of sweatpants, so I didn't have any of my I didn't have this down jacket on or anything, and it still kept me really warm, and it was a cold, windy night. The air was really chilly. I feel just as warm when I sleep in my sleeping bag as I do with my quilt, and my quilt, I love that I can change the way that it's set up because in the mornings a lot of times it gets a lot hotter than it does at night, so then I was roasting in my sleeping bag. I am going to be trying a new sleeping bag tonight just to test it out because the past few nights I've been getting pretty hot in the morning. I used the bigger sleeping bag and I woke up pretty hot. Last night I did get really hot and that's why I woke up. The ability to change the way that it's set up is so nice while you're backpacking. I really think it's going to suit my needs super well for my thru hike because it's so versatile that it can change with you and move with you depending on the weather or just how you're feeling that night. If you're new to my channel or you haven't seen my other videos, I do a lot of videos where I sleep outside, where I camp outside. I've done month-long videos of sleeping outside every night, and I've used my quilt every single night that I've slept outside since I got it, and I don't see myself turning back anytime soon. I absolutely love it. There are so many aspects about it that I love. I love that it's way lighter, it's way more comfortable to me. I love how versatile it is and how warm it is still, while also being cool enough during the hot times. As expensive as it was, I totally think that that purchase was way worth it, and I would easily spend that money again for it. Some reasons why I think that you could want a bag over a quilt is like if you really like the feeling of being closed in. A lot of people don't like being claustrophobic, but I know some nights I did actually want to be just like all tucked in, all wrapped up, especially if it was cold. I didn't want any place where air could escape out, or like I just wanted a bag. I also liked the hood portion of it, so if you like any of that, then you could like a sleeping bag more than a quilt. Kind of what goes along with the hood of it is that if you get cold or if your head gets cold at night, the hood is a really nice feature to have on a sleeping bag because it can keep your head all insulated. But they do sell insulating caps and stuff like that that you can wear with a quilt or even with a bag if you don't have a hood on it. I definitely think that any fear that I had about switching to a quilt was totally extinguished the second that I slept in it, because I was like, oh my goodness, what have I been missing out on? Every plus of my sleeping bag was also in my quilt, but the quilt just had so many added features and was so much lighter that I just can't ever go back to my sleeping bag now. If you have any questions, let me know down below, or let me know if there's anything that I could clear up or that I missed, or what type of sleeping equipment you use and how you like it. I really hope I laid this all out for you in a way where you could understand and you could know whether or not you would want a quilt or a bag, because I was so overwhelmed with the process when I first started. I think one thing that I want to add that I don't hear enough people saying is that whatever gear you have is perfectly fine as long as you are warm, safe, happy. That is totally great. The gear is just an addition to make your trip and your camping experience more enjoyable, but if you are happy with what you have, definitely stick with that. If you are trying to get into backpacking though, or if you realize that a sleeping bag isn't for you, I do highly recommend a quilt. I hope that was helpful. I think that is all that I have to say. I love this quilt. I love you guys. Thank you for watching. Let me know if there's anything that I can clear up for you or what you're thinking. I just love to hear everybody's different sleep systems and camping styles, because no way is the wrong way. Everybody has their own different way, and it's all awesome to learn about. All right, you guys, well, thank you guys so much for watching and for all the love and support, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!